Really want to go to any more junkie funerals.
Before a show in Tokyo on May 7th, John Frusciante told the band he was quitting and going home. The rest of the tour, including 2 more Japanese dates and the entire Australian leg, was canceled.
John was not in a good place with his own substance use and in his own head, and I think he just was exhausted and not taking care of himself and didn't want to be there.
The following month, when the Peppers appeared in a revealing photo on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, Frusciante had been digitally removed.
It was about to go to press. John quit the band. We had to call the cover back, strip John off the cover.
Anthony, Flea, and Chad returned to LA to lick their wounds. John Frusciante simply disappeared, just as he had from the magazine cover.
Touring the world in a way that they hadn't really done before did take a real toll after the big success of Blood Sugar Sex Magik. Flea became exhausted and later was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I think the band as a whole felt kind of spent.
The Chili Peppers were once again down and out. The question was, how could they get back up? In the fall of 1992, the Red Hot Chili Peppers again found themselves one guitar player short of a band. John Frusciante, whose vibrant, freewheeling playing style and songwriting had helped make the band one of the most popular in the world, had quit and disappeared into a drug-filled haze.
With Frusciante, they could do different things. It didn't just have to be fast funk, crazy grooves. They could do beautiful songs.
The Peppers didn't just need a guitar player, they needed an amazing guitar player. And they had one in mind. Former Jane's Addiction guitarist, Dave Navarro.
Dave Navarro was known for his virtuosic playing and creating a real atmospheric type of guitar playing that kind of swirled around the music a lot.
But when the Peppers asked him to join the band, he turned them down.
I was obviously very flattered and knew those guys for many, many years. I happened to be in the process of recording an album with the bass player of Jane's Addiction, Eric Avery, and it was inappropriate for me to jump ship at that time and then, leave him high and dry and then go on a world tour of the Chili Peppers.
The band enlisted the help of veteran LA rock guitarist Eric Marshall to finish the tour. The shows went well, but the band didn't feel the chemistry was right, so Marshall was out. Frustrated, they tried Navarro again.
Flea and I had gotten together and jammed over at Stephen Perkins' house, and Henry Rollins was singing, so we had like this impromptu jam that was basically out of the love of music and the love of jamming, and I connected with Flea so amazingly well in that session.
This time, free of other commitments, Navarro agreed to join the band.
Dave Navarro is a star. I mean, he carries himself like a star, he looks like a star, and it all just seemed so like if all of a sudden Keith Richards was sitting in with The Who on tour. These two enormous bands within that alt-rock community that sort of overnight had this, superstar melding.
To celebrate Navarro joining the band, the Peppers all bought new Harleys and headed off to Hawaii to hang out and write new songs.
We shipped our bikes to Hawaii and all our instruments and basically spent a month to 2 months riding around the island, getting to know each other, which was really important.
I think anybody who was welcomed into the fold had to be a friend that could mesh with them out of the recording studio as well as in. So that was a really key period for them to kind of feel like, well, Dave is one of us and we can do something bigger together.
It may have sounded idyllic, but almost as soon as the Harleys rolled out of the packing crates, there were problems. For starters, lead singer Anthony Kiedis was back to using heroin.
I remember being out in Hawaii, getting ready to write with those guys, and Anthony was just gone, like didn't show up.
And weeks later, when they got back to LA, things only got worse.
Anthony was, a different kind of addict. He would lock himself up in a hotel and disappear for weeks on end. Anthony wasn't like, let's go to the Four Seasons and get high. He would be in some like up downtown grungy Fleabag Hotel.
In July of 1994, when the band got together to record their next album, they were not in a good place, mentally or emotionally.
It would be a lot easier story if it were then they lived happily ever after and everything was great from there, but of course it wasn't. And they still had the same demons.
The record started slowly coming together, but things were not gelling like they had on the last two albums.
I think the guys at the time really missed John because they'd seen how the band had just blossomed on Blood Sugar Sex Magic creatively.
After a month in the studio, the band gave their first live performance together at Woodstock Music Festival. They did it with typical Chili Peppers flair, performing part of their set in giant light bulb costumes. In the studio, however, things were anything but typical. The band was struggling with the high expectations created by the success of their last album.
But I think that all of us were feeling the pressure at the time, and it was really difficult because here I am coming from a totally different musical place. These guys have to follow up their biggest record ever. Our singer is in and out of working with us.
On September 12th, 1995, the band released One Hot Minute. By most accounts, it was a disappointment.
It's not a well-received record. It was not a very successful record. It was not a record they were very proud of.
And when the band hit the road to promote it, the fans were not afraid to show their disapproval of the new lineup.
I remember being at shows and playing and looking out at the audience, and people would have signs like, "Where's John?" and they're yelling at me like, "Bring back John." And I'm like, dude, don't get mad at me. I mean, they would get mad at me.
Toward the end of 1996, drummer Chad Smith broke his wrist and the tour was indefinitely postponed. The band decided to lay low and try to regroup. Little did they know how much regrouping was to come. At the start of 1997, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were taking a little time off to get themselves together after the disappointing release of their sixth studio album, One Hot Minute. While frontman Anthony Kiedis took off for India to try to get clean once and for all, Flea joined Dave Navarro for a Jane's Addiction reunion tour. Meanwhile, former Peppers guitarist John Frusciante had slipped into a drug-addicted haze.
He didn't leave his room. He didn't open the windows. His teeth fell out. I mean, it's every worst, junky, cliche nightmare in your head. That is what Frusciante was living.
In the summer of '97, Fishbone lead singer Angelo Moore got a call from John. He sounded bad.
He said, "Man, the black people are in my paintings, Angelo. You need to come up here and talk to me." I said, "What'd you say?" He said, "The black people are in my paintings, and I need for you to come talk to me, Angelo, because only you'll understand." Sounded like he was trapped in something because he was whispering that.
Angelo rushed over to his house.
John Frusciante was covered in paint from head to toe, paint up his nose and his mouth and in his eyelids. All over the floor, paintings all over the wall, cassette tapes all torn up and ripped out everywhere. So I stayed in the house with him. I was a little scared, but I'm like, well, I'm not gonna leave here because this is my friend.
Frusciante was completely broke, having sold all his guitars and given away his last $2,000 to a cab driver. Flea helped check him into rehab.
The doctor said it was a miracle that the cartilage in his bones and the calcium, the lack, everything that had come out of his body, they were absolutely perplexed that he was still alive. It was an absolute miracle that he was still breathing.
Frusciante slowly began to get clean and nurse himself back to health. At the same time, the band's current guitarist was heading in the opposite direction.
After the Jane's Addiction '97 tour, I ended up getting loaded again and started shooting drugs again. And when Chili Pepper rehearsal started up, I brought it around them. And it was certainly not a strong move on my part.
Having gone through the twin nightmares of Slovak and Frusciante, the Peppers fired Dave Navarro.
At the time, I could only view this as completely hypocritical, but it wasn't working anyway, you know? So what better time? Like, if it's not working now, add heroin and cocaine.